What's up, y'all, and welcome to another installment of the For the Gram podcast. This is a show where I, Jaksyn, am your host as I take you through a topic of interest to me, whether that's something new in the news, or something that's just a current event, or some hip trend that people are following, but in the end, it's all going to be relevant enough for the gram. This episode is a little different. I'm not really sure where it's going to go. So I'm just going to start saying words and we're going to see what happens. So a thing that I wanted to do in this episode was bring back my Behind the Hype segment. So this week I'm going to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is a show that came out on Nickelodeon as I was growing up, but I never really watched it because anime was never my thing. And yes, Avatar is an anime, but it's like a loose anime, so it's got a really good story to it. Also, it's 3 seasons and it's I think it's one of the most perfect animated shows out there. Like, it's got a beginning and then a middle, and then another middle, and then another middle, and then an end, like a satisfying ending that spans across the entirety of the 3 seasons, and it works really well. But with this show, Avatar, it follows Aang. He's a 12-year-old boy who is from the Air Nation, and so he is an air nomad and he is an air bender. So they bend elements in this show. So they bend earth, fire, water, and air. So Aang is the last airbender who survives after the Fire Nation wipes out the Air Nation, the air nomads, I guess. And so he is surviving in this iceberg, and they find him, Katara and Sokka, who are the other 2 main characters in the show. They find him in an iceberg near their home in the Southern Water Tribe, so they're part of the Water Nation. And so Katara is like a wannabe waterbender at the beginning of the show, and so she's just trying to do all this bending, and then Sokka is trying to fish with his boomerang because he has a boomerang, and Sokka is voiced by Jaksyn. And I have always said that if I had someone to play me in an animated movie, it would be Jaksyn, just because he is super animated and like super energetic, and I think it would be a pretty good fit. But that's besides the point. But this show, Avatar, I just watched it during COVID. That was when it was released on Netflix, and I was able to watch the entire part of the entire show. And then there's a movie version called The Last Airbender, and it's directed by M. Night Shyamalan. And if you don't know anything about his movies, they're very hit or miss. Like, he directed Unbreakable, he directed The Sixth Sense, he directed The Visit, he directed a lot of horror thriller type movies, and then his odd one out is The Last Airbender. And The Last Airbender is known as being the movie that never worked. Like, it was so bad. Like, they ended up making a live action show recently, summer of 2023, I think, or early spring, I don't remember, but they made a Avatar: The Last Airbender live action show, and everybody was really nervous about it. But then at the same time, how can you get worse than this movie? Like, this movie tried to pack 3 seasons of a well-made show into a 90-minute movie, and it was terrible. It was so bad. The CGI was atrocious. Some of the fighting made no sense. But then, like, you go back to the original show and you watch that, and it's so good. Like, the whole time Aang is being hunted down by the prince of the Fire Nation, Prince Zuko, and he has like a scar on his face the whole time, and everybody's like, what's the scar doing there? And you find out he was banished from the Fire Nation, and he was not allowed to come back unless he brought back the Avatar. But the Avatar had been lost for 100 years in the 100-Year War, and so Aang is technically 112 years old, and Zuko thinks that if he's able to bring back the Avatar, then he would be reinstated in the Fire Nation. And so that is his plot point almost the entire show. And he like gets really close a lot of the time. Like he has Aang a lot of the time, and then Aang wants to become friends every now and again, be like, Zuko's just misunderstood, and you're like, okay. But then he attacks them again, and he's like, oh, no, we're just not gonna interact with him all that much, apart from, like, the battles and stuff. But Aang's mission the entire time is to learn how to bend all the elements, because he's the Avatar. So the Avatar is a person who is able to master all 4 of the elements and like have the power to bend all of them. Like normally if you're a bender, you can bend 1 element, and that's like your specialty, and it's all based on like where you live in the fictional world that they're in. And most people are not benders. Most people just don't have the ability to bend the elements and stuff like that. But Aang can bend all of them, and he flies around on his sky bison named Appa, who is the coolest looking creature from this show. Like they have a bunch of animals that are like cross breeds of animals that actually exist in like the real life. And so there's like platypus bears and all these other like mixtures of animals. And there's one episode in season 2 where they're like, everybody's coming to see the king's bear, and it's like, what, you mean his platypus bear? And they're like, no, just a bear. And they're like, what's a bear? And so then they bring in like an actual bear, and that's like the pet of the king of the Earth Nation, or Ba Sing Se is the city that they're in at that point. If you know, you know, I guess. Like I'm not trying to spoil a lot of the show. I'm just trying to like briefly recap it. But if you haven't seen Avatar, I highly recommend it. It's a good watch. It's got heart, it's got friendship, it's got conflict, it's got a bunch of like misdirection and like mystery to it that you can kind of like unravel as you go throughout the show. And then just overall the plot is like really, really good. Like they're like on the way to, in the first season, they're on the way to go learn how to waterbend from the Northern Water Tribe, and then in the second season they go to learn how to earthbend, and then in the third season Aang learns how to firebend. And so it's set up in like nice installments, because he already learned how to airbend before he was frozen in this iceberg for 100 years. And he has like an arrow tattoo over his head, and that is, you get that when you invent a new type of bending, become like a monk for the air nomads. And so Aang creates the wind sphere, whatever, and it's like a little one-wheel bicycle made out of like an air ball, which is kind of cool. And he invented that type of airbending, so he got his arrow tattoo like really, really quickly. And then he became the Avatar, so then he got ripped away from having a normal childhood and was forced into Avatar training and stuff like that. And then the Fire Nation wiped out all of the air nomads in one fell swoop, and then they didn't win the war for some reason, they're like, the Air Nation is gone, and we knew the Avatar was in the Air Nation, and so they're all gone now. So there should be nobody to stand in our way, right? And then they end up having a war for 100 more years, and through 3 emperors, I think, or Fire Lords, I guess, is what they're called in the show. But it's a really good show. I would highly recommend watching it if you haven't already. Like, it's a good show. And if you have watched it, watch it again. It's worth it. It's so good. And then there's, like I said, there's the live action remake that they're coming out with. And that one's not as good. It's better than the movie, but I think the acting is just super cringy and it's not really all that worth it. But there are some parts that are really, really cool to see in like real life as opposed to in an animation. And so it's not a bad thing to check out. There are 10 episodes per season, I think. And so they had to split it up into 10 1-hour episodes instead of all the individual 30-minute episodes that were the original show. But they got greenlit for a season 2 and I think a season 3 already, so they're gonna try and make the rest of the show, which is a little ambitious, I think, but it'll all be okay with all of that. Moving on, something that I kind of want to talk about because it's like relevant in the world today, I guess, is since I'm back at school, I've learned that a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about a lot of different things. And if you know me, I am someone who has a lot of strong opinions about weak topics, or in other words, I have a lot of personal attachments to things that should not really matter. So it's like, for example, I am an avid supporter of the fact that boneless wings are better than bone-in chicken wings. I know boneless wings are just chicken nuggets. They're just glorified chicken nuggets, but I don't like eating food off of bones. I just don't. It leaves my hands a big mess. It makes it difficult to eat, like, in a relatively clean manner, but I just am not a fan. I do like the crispness of it, but I'm not like, I need it on the bone, you know what I'm saying? Like, I get some chicken is better on the bone. I don't care. I am just one of those people that will prefer to just eat my chicken without the bone in it. And that's fine, I guess. And another thing that I have strong inclinations for is I'm not a spice person. There's one of my friends who is majorly into spice, and it's super intimidating just because I can't do it. Like, it's bad. Like, I can barely stand the flamin' hot potato chips. Like, I can't even do it. It's weird. It's weird. I did a bit with one of my friends for our audition season last year, where we made a Hot Ones Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader style game show, and that was our bit. And he ate all the spicy food, and I thought I killed him. Like, we walked out of that room and I was like, I definitely killed his mouth. I don't know what I did, but he will not be able to eat anymore. And then I walked up to him and I just go, I'm sorry I made you do that. And he just goes, dude, I'm fine. And he's like, I've eaten worse. This is not even close to the worst food I've eaten. So he just put his body through the ringer and he was like, it's fine. I was okay. I did it and it was all good. But I just can't. Spicy food is not my jam. Like, I don't like how the flavors mold together in spicy food. I just can't do it. And I know there's a wide variety of people who also can't do it. But I am one of those people who's just like, nope, I'm going to avoid this altogether because I don't want to burn my mouth, because food is my favorite thing in the world. And so the fact that it would hinder me from eating anything else for like a day to a week, I'd be like, nope, It's like the sensation you get when burning your mouth, like if you burn your tongue on something, which is weird because I was eating food a couple days ago and I was using a metal fork, and I never put two and two together that metal is a conductor of heat, so therefore it's gonna make it easier to burn your tongue on stuff when you're eating with a metal utensil. And so it's like I don't even like burning my mouth on things, because then I just can't enjoy the food for the rest of the meal, I guess. It's weird. It's a weird thing. And then I'm a media major, so I believe, like, going back to opinions and things like that, I believe everyone is entitled to one media hot take. Everybody has one outlandish thing that they like about movies or pop culture, so like fandoms and things like that. Mine is that puppetry in movies is cool. Like, I love the Henson Company, like the people who made the Muppets and things like that. I love the stuff that they do, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. I completely understand that, but I love puppets in movies. I love puppets in TV shows. I want people to do more puppetry. Literally, my first show in college was Pinocchio, and part of our audition was we had to see who all could operate a puppet in like a lifelike way, and we learned about different like biomechanics and stuff like that. So ways of making things look lifelike without showing the puppeteers necessarily. Like, if you make things look believable enough, then they'll just fade away into the background and you just only focus on the puppet. And that's a really, really cool thing. But like, as I'm going further in my media career, is like I'm noticing more and more things about how creatively these projects are shot, just to avoid getting puppeteers in the frames and things like that. And so it's like Sesame Street and the Muppets, everybody is filmed from the waist up, and you notice that. Like, it's weird, but they are. And so they're filmed by the waist up because the puppets only go so high when people are operating them. And then, like, it's a weird thing because, like, the Big Bird puppet is a two-man operated puppet. It was supposed to be a one-man in the original concept, but it's a two-man operated puppet. So one man operates the legs and one of the arms, and then the other guy operates the other arm, the beak, or I think one person operates the legs and the arms, and the other person operates the eyes and the beak. Like, it's crazy some of the stuff that they're able to do with these puppets. And then there's another story that I think is just wild, but so a little while ago, the Sesame Street people were coordinating with NASA on trying to get kids interested in going to space and like space travel and space exploration and stuff. But apparently, I don't know if this is true, but I would not doubt it at all, is that Big Bird was supposed to be on board the Challenger just as a way to get kids interested in space travel and things like that. But the puppeteer got sick, so he didn't end up getting to go, and then the Challenger launched and exploded. So that would have been a scarring event in history if Big Bird went up in the Challenger and it blew up. Like, it would have been insane for people to just watch that, because kids would be watching it because they'd be like, oh, Big Bird is going to space. Here we go. And then it would not end well. But that's my side tangent on puppets, I guess. I think puppetry is really, really cool. It's an underrated art form. Like, ventriloquism is a crazy art form in and of itself. Like, being able to express certain things without moving your lips is kind of crazy. And one of my friends tried doing ventriloquism once, and he could do it pretty well, except he couldn't pronounce his P's and B's. They would be like constantly like muffled. But that's not the crazy part about it. Like, the crazy part is that his puppet was a panda bear, and his name was Pablo. So it was Pablo the panda bear, but he couldn't pronounce his P's and B's when he was like being a ventriloquist. So he couldn't say the name of his puppet because it was a panda bear. And oh my goodness, it was wild. I can't even begin to explain how funny this was. Like, he was pretty good, but he couldn't say the name of his puppet because he just couldn't get those plosive consonants in there. And so that was wild. He gave up with ventriloquism shortly after that, but I'm still fascinated by ventriloquists and like puppetry and stuff like that, and I would love to do more of it if I could, but it's a very like specifically used art form, so you don't get to see a lot of people doing it, and you don't get to like, other than like hand puppets and stuff like that, you don't have access to like a lot of marionettes all the time. But then there's moments too where puppets are like kind of scary in movies and stuff. Like Goosebumps, I know, has Slappy, who's a puppet, who's also voiced by Jack Black, who plays R.L. Stine in the movie too. But like, creepy puppets are probably a reason why people don't like them in like general, is just because puppets are kind of creepy. Like, they're not the most enticing thing to look at. Like, I know when we were doing Pinocchio, when we were building our Pinocchio puppet, he just had a head made out of EVA foam or whatever, and he had no eyes for the vast majority of it. And we were like, nope, we're not going to look at that thing. And then another thing that was really funny that really only the cast knows about is when we were making the puppet for Pinocchio, we chiseled abs into his EVA foam chest. And then when we were making the torso later for a scene like prop and stuff like that, when like Geppetto was carving him out of wood and stuff like that, we put the abs on the torso, and we thought it was really funny, and some of the audiences thought it was really funny too, but we were all just like, we know that the original Pinocchio also had abs, so it was great. We also made like a little tiny Pinocchio puppet out of like a Barbie doll, so we couldn't really put abs on there, but a lot of the times Ken dolls do come with abs anyway, so it was just a nice like consistent thing that we did with just putting abs on all of our Pinocchio puppets. But puppets are just wild. Like, I think they're crazy. Like, some of the work that people do to make these things look as realistic as they are, like, is kind of nerve-wracking, but also super interesting. And so I think that's a cool thing about media, and not everybody thinks that. Like, I want to see more puppets, but everybody's like, no, CGI, do CGI, make robots, just don't make puppets. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're moving in a more technological type of world, but I think puppets are really cool. And if you ever want to talk to me about puppets, let me know, because I love puppets. Like, I know so much about the Muppets. That might be its own episode in the future, me just talking about Muppets and stuff like that. But I love puppets. The thing with like opinions in like the media is that like everybody has one. Everybody has a hot take. Everybody has something that they're willing to take to the grave with them or whatever. And like I think the wildest one is one of my professors. Like people will know this. Like one of my professors, his hot take is that, and it's not a hot take to him. To him it's the truth, but he says that the Star Wars prequels are ranked in order of release: 1, 2, 3. And I think that's absurd. I'm like, at least it's not 2 at number 1, because I think 2 was the weakest out of all of them in like a story standpoint and like a cinematic standpoint. Like the first 20 minutes of Revenge of the Sith, like that was pretty cool. And I remember I took a Star Wars test in high school. One of my teachers would give out a Star Wars test at the end of every trimester, because we didn't do semesters at my high school, we did trimesters, so 3 12-week trimesters. And at the end of every one, he would give out a Star Wars test, and it was like Star Wars knowledge, and he had like 10 questions from each prequel movie, just because the prequels were garbage, and he knew it and we knew it. And so he just made sure that we were all on the same page in that aspect. But I think everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but everyone also has the right to be wrong. You know what I mean? Like it's a wild assumption that 1, 2, 3 is the correct ranking, let alone just a ranking of the Star Wars prequels. Something I want to talk about now is Labor Day is coming up here soon. And so, like, I don't even know. Like, Labor Day has always been the time where I go see my dad's side of the family. Like, since I moved to Minnesota, like, we've always just gone to see my dad's side of the family, and we'd like play games and stuff. And so it was always like that part of a thing. So I'm always driving for 10 hours across the span of that weekend, and then we're going to school on that Tuesday. And so it's like now that trip is just shorter, because we would leave Saturday morning and then we come back Sunday night or Monday early, and then we'd go back to school on Monday. And I live at school, so it's just a weird thing. It's only like a 48-hour trip, but it's still enough time, I think, to see everybody and like get caught up with how things are going. And then we just come back and go about everyday life. But it's like other people do things too, I think. Like it's a big lake weekend. It's like one of the last big lake weekends of the year, I think. And then there's like barbecues and stuff like that. But like I just learned recently that it's like Labor Day is to recognize like contributions in labor and the labor movement and stuff like that. And it's like some people think that Labor Day is like it's like a military holiday, like Veterans Day and Memorial Day and stuff like that, but it's actually just like about the labor movement and stuff like that. And that's always interesting. I'm like, why do we have so many different federal holidays that just, it's the first Monday of every September. And so it's just like having a day off at the end of a school week. It's like a teacher in service day from high school. Like we rarely even have those anymore, just because we're losing time. We're already getting pushed into June as it is. But it's like my school starts before Labor Day, and now so many different schools are starting after Labor Day. Like, it's always interesting. Like, I started after Labor Day my 8th grade year just because they were renovating our high school and our middle school and stuff like that. So it was only just due to construction that we started after that, and then we ended on like June 8th. And so it was like we were already being pushed into June, and now it's like you start the last week in August and then you still end that first week in June. But it's whatever. It's not that big a deal. It's just one day. It's like your Martin Luther King Jr. Day and your President's Day and stuff like that. So it's just a nice time to spend with my family, at least, I think. And so there's always that fun weekend. And then, like, I'm sure people like enjoy the weather because it's typically good weather. I know the last couple of years it's rained a lot here in Minnesota, at least. And so, like, raining over like break weekends, I don't always like that, just because you have nothing else to do except you can like try and be productive by like going outside and stuff like that. But if it's raining, you can't really do any of that, I guess. And like another thing with like visiting my dad's side of the family is we would always, like, it was a tradition that we would go down and see them, and we would have Casey's Pizza, which this is another strong opinion about weak things that I possess, and that's Casey's Pizza is like top 10 pizzas, and not even top 10 gas station pizzas. It's top 10 pizzas. Like, I really like Casey's Pizza, and we used to have it like once a year because there was just a Casey's everywhere down by where my family is at. But this time around, like, there's been a Casey's like less than a mile away from my house, like, for 4 years, 5 years now. And so it's been less of a special thing and more of like, we get it every now and again just because we're kind of sick of it if you have nothing but Casey's Pizza all the time. And I remember when they used to have like box things. There's like a little coupon on the box where it's like, if you get 10 pizzas, then you get one free. And then you'd bring in the little box slips of cardboard and stuff like that, and then you'd get a free pizza. But they don't even do that anymore. It's all like digital on the app through like rewards points and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I don't even remember what box tops were used for on things, but I remember they used to be on everything, and now there's like a box top QR code, and you go to a website and you like log how many box tops you have. And I'm like, I miss the fun of like collecting box tops, because like my family, at least like my school, did a box top fundraiser, I think, and we had a drawer full of them for that day. So we like collected them throughout the year, and we just had this drawer full of box tops, and then we would like bring them all into school, and then we'd collect them at school and stuff like that. I don't even remember what they were for. I just remember we had a lot of them, and they varied in sizes from like the teeny tiny little ones to like the big ones. There was like huge box tops. And so that's just a weird thing that I think about sometimes, is whatever happened to box tops? Why do people like are there kids out there who are deprived of collecting box tops? Like, I just don't know. I just don't know. With that all being said, I'm just going to hop right into this week's rendition of 3 things you need to know. So, number 1, there is a baseball player named Danny Jansen. And if you don't know who Danny Jansen is, I don't blame you. I didn't know who he was until like a couple weeks ago either. but he is a baseball player for the Boston Red Sox, and he was formerly a baseball player for the Toronto Blue Jays. And what's significant about this is he was playing on the Blue Jays against the Red Sox, and the game was postponed during his at bat. So while he was up to hit, the game was postponed due to rain. And so they got sent back to today, August 26th. And he since has been traded to the Boston Red Sox. So he is potentially the first ever player, Danny Jaksyn, to play for both of the teams in the same game, potentially within the same at bat. So he is playing for the Red Sox, where he would have played for the Blue Jays, but the Blue Jays traded him away. So he's going to get to play for both teams in the same game potentially, and that's something that's never happened before, and I'm all for it. I'm so excited to see if he actually plays, and it's going to be crazy. Number 2 is a teacher named Elaine Salmon. Literally, that is her last name, and I think that's awesome. She is an elementary school teacher in Pine Mountain, California, and she was getting her classroom ready for school to start, and she just left for a little bit, and she left the door open, and then she got back and opened her classroom door because the door had been shut for some reason. And so she opened the door, and inside is a young brown bear just roaming the classroom. There's a brown bear in this person's classroom. It wandered in from the surrounding woods, and she says that she closed the door immediately and just locked the bear in there. Because she opened the door and she was like, why is this door closed? And she opened it, and there was a bear running right at her from inside of her classroom. And she said it was one of the craziest things that she'd ever witnessed. And so she closed the door and she locked it. And then she was more concerned about the safety of her room in which she teaches elementary school kids she was more concerned about the room than she was about the bear. And it's like, is it gonna do any damage? There's a brand new floor in there. If she put up decorations already, would the bear ruin the decorations? And so she called her husband, and so they began banging on the windows to get the bear's attention. And then they opened the door, and the bear ran out into the wooded mountain area surrounding the school. And so the crisis was averted. The bear didn't do any real damage to the classroom, but there was still a bear in there nonetheless. And so she had to get it out of there. And it's like, what do you even do in that scenario? If there's a wild animal in your classroom, if you walked into your classroom in the middle of Minnesota and there was a lynx in there, or if there was a deer in your classroom, more realistically probably, if there was just a deer chilling in your classroom, what would you do? How would you even respond to a situation like that? I just think it's wild. And then number 3 is kind of on a similar note. So there was a reported story of raccoons trying to break in to a Tesla Cybertruck. And it's what? Why? Is it that similarly shaped to a dumpster that raccoons just want to break into it and just eat all this garbage that they would find within a dumpster? but it's just actually a Tesla Cybertruck. And like, it was like, they were not necessarily like making marks on it, because like the Tesla Cybertruck is supposed to be like indestructible or whatever, but they were like handprints and like scratch marks all over it, and it was kind of cool to see, actually. Just people found it in the morning, and they were camping, and they found that raccoons had tried to break into their Tesla Cybertruck. And it's like, I don't even know, like, I know Teslas are like electric vehicles and stuff, but I don't know what the appeal is of the Cybertruck as opposed to a normal Tesla. Like, don't they all just do the same thing, and the Cybertruck just looks like a souped up version of that? Like, I'm not really sure. There's someone in my neighborhood who owns a Tesla Cybertruck. I was driving home from work one day with my sister, and like, we were like, that, what is that? And because we only saw the headlights, it was at night, and we only saw the headlights, and we were like, that's a weird shape for headlights to be. And then we drove past it, and it was a Tesla Cybertruck, and I was like, why does somebody have that? Like, I don't even get it. Like, it's just a really, really expensive car that, I mean, I guess is saving the environment because it's electric, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know anywhere in like my immediate area that has like a charging station for a Tesla. So I'm not really sure how they go about charging it, but I just thought it was funny that raccoons decided to break in to a Cybertruck. And like, I think Elon Musk tweeted back at it being like, already working on the revisions or something like that, to be like, okay, we're one-upping the raccoons right now. I already one-upped the compound bow, but I'm gonna one-up some raccoons, make sure the raccoons can't break into this Cybertruck. And yeah, so that's gonna do it for this week's edition of 3 Things You Need to Know. I just want to give you guys a quick reminder that next week, being Labor Day, is going to be an off week for the podcast, just because I am a student. I am trying to keep this up and running, but in order to do that right now, I think I'm only going to be able to do 1 episode every other week, since I'm in the school year. And then we'll see towards the end of the school year if I want to start picking up and doing 1 episode a week again. But I am going to have a week off to enjoy my Labor Day weekend, and I hope you guys also enjoy your Labor Day weekend. And so I'm going to take a week off, and then we're going to probably try and do the second and fourth Monday of every month, unless it's a weird month that doesn't have a second and fourth Monday. But it's going to try to be every other week starting this week. So it's this week and then a week off, and then the next week and stuff like that. So I hope that doesn't like impede anybody from listening to it or anything like that. And I'll try and keep as updated as I can on my Instagram, just making sure that like the upload schedule is as up to date on there as I possibly can make it. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of the For the Gram podcast. If you liked what you heard, please try and give me some feedback on my Instagram at forthegrahampod, all lowercases, no spaces. Or you can send me an email at forthegrahampod@gmail.com. I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening.